Hi there. Obviously, you're concerned with how to pay for the nursing home, or you wouldn't be here right now. You're between a payment rock and a hard place called the nursing home is what it is. I know how you feel. I'm Bob Mason, and I am going to be addressing these concerns of yours in this presentation. I've had plenty of experience, and I won't talk about myself too much more other than to say I've got 32 years under my belt of practicing law in the states and trusts and elder law, and I've got the credentials to show for it. So in this one little slice of life, I know what I'm talking about. I want you to ask yourself during this presentation, if you had to go into a nursing home, or if someone you love, perhaps a spouse or a parent, had to go into a nursing home, would that person risk losing a big chunk of everything that they have? And if the answer to that is yes, you need to see an experienced elder law attorney. If your answer is, I don't know, or maybe, you still need to see an experienced elder law attorney. We've also figured out how to operate around this thing called COVID-19, and I'll talk a bit more about that, but we've come up with some very good workarounds so that we can continue to serve you. By 2030, 50% more Americans will have Alzheimer's disease. I don't know where it's coming from, whether it's environmental or whatever, but the incidence of Alzheimer's is increasing dramatically. In the next 10 years, the amount of folks with type 2 diabetes is going to double. And since 1997, there has been a huge increase of men and an even greater increase of women dying from various neurological conditions like ALS, Parkinson's, dementia, and they're doing it at younger and younger ages. 70, what's that? That's the percentage of those over 65 who are going to end up in the long-term care system. 40. That is the percentage of folks over 65 who are going to end up in a nursing home at some point during the rest of their lives. And guess what? The costs defy the laws of gravity. What goes up must come down. Not so here. The costs are going up dramatically. By 2025, they're estimating that the cost of a nursing home could be up around $126,000. All right, let me get on my soapbox for just a moment. It's a crazy system that we have right now. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm going to be talking about Medicaid because for many of you, that may be the only sound alternative that you've got to pay for the nursing home. We have a system that was invented back in 1965. Remember LBJ's Great Society? It's when they came up with Medicare, which is actually a federal health insurance plan. They've been in the health insurance business now for 54, 55 years. And Medicaid, which was originally meant to be a welfare benefit plan. Now, back in the mid-60s, nursing homes weren't that big a deal. Why? Because over the past 55 years, medicine has gotten better. People back in the 60s were dying of strokes, cancers, heart attacks, what have you, and being swept away much more quickly than they are here. Medicine's gotten better, and that means folks are hanging around longer to get those chronic type conditions that I was telling you about that could land them in a nursing home. The other crazy thing about the system is what I call this lottery of disease. If you get the, quote, right disease, and I mean that facetiously, but if you get a certain disease, don't worry, Medicare will take care of it. Medicare Part A, Part B, or perhaps Medicare Part C, an Advantage plan, will take care of it. On the other hand, if you get one of these chronic type diseases and you end up in a nursing home, Medicare will pay for a little bit of it for a little while, but basically you're on your own. I'll give you an example. One sad example for me in my life is about 27 years ago, my father developed brain cancer, a glioblastoma. And he went through radiation, surgery, chemo before he eventually died. And in that 6-month period of time, I would imagine the system spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on them. And that was all covered by Medicare, and my parents had a Medigap policy, a Medicare supplement, took care of it. But instead of glioblastoma, if my father had developed some form of dementia or neurological condition and ended up in the nursing home, they would have been clean out of luck, mainly because I don't know anything about Texas law, and that's where they were at the time, so I wouldn't have been able to help them quite as much. So we have this lottery of disease that ends up putting some people out of the Medicare system and keeping some folks in the Medicare system. The other crazy thing about the system is, in my mind, it punishes the folks who've done everything right. The folks who don't have a thing to show for it, who've been living hand to mouth their entire lives, something happens, they end up in a nursing home, no big deal. They'll go down to the Department of Social Services, apply for Medicaid. On the other hand, if you're fortunate enough to be one of those 1%ers, and I'm not an envious sort of guy, if you are, good for you. But if you're one of the 1%ers, heck, you might even be able to buy the nursing home, but at least you aren't going to mind shelling out 10 grand a month for the nursing home. It's not going to put a hurting on you. On the other hand, if you're one of these folks who worked hard all your life, paid off your debts, paid off your bills, saved, didn't take many fancy vacations, you didn't drive around the latest automobile and everything, and now you've got this massive fortune of maybe a few $100,000 or more and a paid-for house, and suddenly disaster strikes, you're the one that's going to get squeezed. And by and large, that's most of my clientele, and that's why I do not mind helping them out a bit. All right, back off my soapbox. I've talked the political angle. Now let's take a look at some real-life examples. By the way, for those of you who are fans of old TV shows and everything, some of these names may come to you. But let's take a look at Don and Jean Adams. Don served some time in the Army. After his discharge from the Army, they got married. Don went to pharmacy school, and he opened up a drugstore. By the way, any of you remember Rexall drugs? I haven't seen one of those in a long time. And while he was working in the drugstore, Jean stayed home and was raising the kids. There's some icons out of my childhood. I guess I'm dating myself. The Adams bought a ranch-style residence in 1970 for $40,000, and they paid it off in 2000, and it's worth $250,000 right now. And over the years, they accumulated some more assets. Jean's grandfather gave her 50 acres of farmland in 1962. It was part of the original farm, family farm. And the granddad inherited it from his father in 1936. And by the way, I borrowed those facts directly from a real client situation that I had, and I'm going to explain some of the tax ramifications in just a moment. They also accumulated over the years about $400,000 worth of additional assets. But what didn't they do? They didn't do very good at estate planning. They had I love you wills. Do you know what an I love you will is? That's one of my favorite terms. It means mom and dad each have wills that says I leave everything to my spouse, and if my spouse isn't alive, I leave everything to my kids. Simple I love you wills. Or worse yet, they may not even have any wills. No powers of attorney. And I don't know why I should be surprised, but it still surprises me the number of clients that I see right here around this conference room table who don't have powers of attorney. And the vast majority of people do not have long-term care insurance. And I can't really blame them for that. The long-term care insurance market over the past 20, 30 years has been just an absolute mess. What else didn't they do? No plan to protect the house, the farm, or anything else that they protected. It's all just hanging out there. Finally, Don has a stroke. He goes into a nursing home. And guess what? Jean spends and spends. Over the next 18 months, they've spent about $170,000 for Don's care. And then Don dies. Remember, they had I love you wills. Jean now has about $230,000 of that $400,000 remaining. She's got her home. It's all in her name right now. And of course, she still has the farm. And for a time, Jean enjoys her family. She gets to see the daughter, other kids, her grandkids, and she feels like life is getting back to normalcy until Alzheimer's sets in for Jean. She eventually goes to the nursing home, and over the next several months or so, she deteriorates. And after 18 months, guess what? The cash is all gone. So, what happens? You got the farm. So her guardian, because she didn't have a power of attorney, her guardian, by the way, had to go to court and get appointed as a guardian, put the farm on the market, and it sold under market value for $120,000. Let me give you just a brief hint, useful hint. You aren't really doing a good job of protecting property by putting it in the name of the kids. First of all, good kids get sued, they get in trouble, what have you, and poof, the asset's gone. The other thing to keep in mind is a little bit of tax talk here. Capital gains is what it's called. Tax basis is the amount that you paid for an asset, or if you received the asset as a gift, the value or the basis of the gift givers is now your basis. That's why they call it transferred basis. Remember, Jean's grandfather got the farm from his father. Grandfather gave Jean the property. If you think back, Jean's basis in the property is the value of that property in 1936, probably just a few bucks an acre, if that. She has next to zero basis in that farm. Capital gains is figured when you sell an asset, the amount you received minus basis. If she received, or rather her guardian received $120,000, or rather $120,000 and minus basis of near zero, that $120,000 is going to almost be almost all capital gains, and it's going to run her, it could run her capital gains as much as $24,000. That hurts. Okay, in another 15 months, the farm proceeds are gone. And at long last, $270,000 later, Jean is qualified for Medicaid. And then after 6 months, Jean dies. Now, this is where we add insult to injury. Jean died broke. She died on Medicaid, but the house is still sitting there. Because a home, as we're going to learn here in a moment, is not a countable asset for Medicaid, but it's certainly an asset that can be there to be collected against after the Medicaid recipient dies if it's not handled correctly. For Jean, it was not handled correctly. The state came after it to assert a $60,000 Medicaid claim. The house goes on the market, and there you go.